is our last day of Strength Finders, Gallup Strength Finders 2.0. The good news is that the grant, because I think we're still trying to find creative ways of spending that $1.2 million, the grant has paid for the purchase of that book for every employee in every school district in HFM region. So all of you, I'm sure, will be wondering how is it that you're going to have this program implemented in your school system. I don't have the answer to that. I think every superintendent and every building level leader will be involved in that, and maybe leadership team conversations will occur, and maybe committees and whatnot. But the good part is for all of you is that you've been exposed to it. So you have first-hand knowledge of what it can be and maybe what you don't believe it should be. And that truly is your decision. So hopefully you can play a positive role in how it is this work might evolve in your own school system. So we have visitors here from Lake Pleasant, Northville, HFM, Broad Perk. We kind of have an eclectic group here. As I promised, I have your large team sheets. So for those of you from Lake Pleasant, you're going to get it before some of your colleagues will that might be coming here on June 2nd and Northville as well. So you decide whether you want to share that with them or whether you want to keep it secret. After today, you will get an email from me. And that email will include an electronic version of this document. So you can take it and continue to fill in that chart. And you will also get an email link to a SurveyMonkey evaluation of my performance as your trainer for Gallup Strength Finders. I plead to you to take the time to complete that survey. I sent it out to 3 cohorts so far. I'm going to make all of you feel bad. I sent it out to 3 cohorts, which is over 100 people have received that survey, and only 14 have completed it. So I'm going to beg you. I am not making a dime, and I put in a lot of time into this. So the only thing I want in return is your opinion, because it will help me continue to do this here in Broad Perk. And your opinion is very important to me. It is an online survey. It will honestly take you less than 3 minutes to complete. It might take you a little bit longer. The very last question is any more comments. You choose to type in comments, that will take you longer. It is a very short, quick, easy survey. So please look for that. You will get that tomorrow, by the end of the week. We'll start doing it. And before we get started, I want to mention a couple of other things. Teach with Your Strengths is an awesome book by Gallup, and it is specific to how it is that you can take Strength Finders work and implement it in what you do every day in the classroom, whether you are a teacher or whether you're a leader in some capacity in your building. It is an awesome book. You can find it on GallupStrengthCenter.com, which is the website that I've been kind of pushing all along with you. And I think this was $14.99, $15.99, something like that. But it's an awesome book. It's just another resource for all of you to have, but it is specific to education. It's an awesome book. So hopefully you'll enjoy it enough to grab that. Did all of you get this book? Read it. No? Some did, some didn't. I don't know how that decision was made at BOCES. Maybe it depends on what part of the grant you're on. I really don't know. But this is an awesome book. This takes it a step further. Mr. Marshall was actually one of the first people that actually shared your report. It is an awesome fit. It's a different report than the Gallup Strength Finders 2.0, and it's specific to your leadership tasks and what your capacity is as a leader. Now again, I'm not talking about as an administrator, I'm talking about as a leader. I think we all want to understand that all of you in your role as teachers, or whatever role it is that you serve now or you aspire to be in the future, leadership is within all of you. And this can give you a little bit different perspective as to what your capacity is through the talents and strengths and levels. Okay? So, awesome book.
So the one in the back of that, the envelope in the back of that is different than the other?
It is. It's It's a different survey. This also, this also has an envelope. So it's another online survey. Questions different, but more towards leadership type of.
Is there a way we can get those books from the district?
You know, I'm going to have to find, I don't know how it is that they bought it. What's that?
Maybe that big to use our grant money goes to the.
You know what? Well, I'll get it to all brought up for people. I can't speak for anybody else. Brought up for people, you'll get it. You'll get it. This is Strengths Explorer. This is Strengths Explorer. This is the elementary version of Strengths Quest. I was talking to the Northville people and they were asking me what my intention for a young girl person. My long-term intentions are simply, we need to get our students involved. We need to get our students involved in this. It starts in late elementary school, 10 years old, so around fourth grade. So this particular program is called Strengths Explorer, and then 15 through 18, the upper age is Strengths Quest. For those of you that are familiar with the program Naviance, it's actually a high school guidance program. Naviance has Strengths Quest built into it. So we actually have our high school students, actually talking to one of our high school students today, and we were going over his talents through Strengths Quest. So I would encourage all of you to get involved in this program. So I want to show you that Nancy Brown, who's a teacher in the, I always get this building, Park Terrace, I always get it, Park Terrace, good job. Pleasant. Park Terrace. Nancy Brown actually wrote a grant, and through an online grant type of thing, and this was 100% paid for her students. So she actually worked with the students and the parents and the families in her particular classroom, and she's actually implemented this program. And she just raves about what the impact has been on her students. Yes, red pieces over here. So that's something that I know we will be looking at and brought up first, exploring how it is that we're going to responsibly and implement it and draw up first. So all of you are going back to the district, you'll determine what it is that this all means to you. All right, enough of that. What I do, you cannot do. Well, what you do, I cannot do. The needs are great, and none of us, including me, ever do great things. But we can all do small things. With great love and together, we can do something wonderful. Does anybody want to guess? The $1 million question. Who said that? Sandy said it, but she doesn't want to. I'm sure a lot of people are saying I'm so right. Mother Teresa said that. So really, what today's program is about is talking about Strengths Finders 2.0 and ultimately culminating with how do we believe this will impact our work in collaborative partnerships and teaming, department meetings, and grade level meetings, your work with someone else. So you're actually leaving yourself today. You're leaving that behind and putting yourself in collaboration with at least one other person or a group of people. That's really what today is all about. We could spend another 3 trainings on where we can go with this with teams. But we all know that no one single person is ever, in most cases, as good as coming together with someone else to accomplish the goal. So we take our strength-based development evolution. We started on the left. This was us talking about you as an individual, moving closer to where we are today with partnerships and teaming, all focused around a particular or common goal. So what Gallup says is what makes us successful is finding creative alternatives for using our unique ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving to fulfill your goals, demands of a role, or a desired outcome. So for those of you in your own districts that have been talking about goal setting, setting action plans, coming to some common, meeting some common strategic plans that you had. Today is really all about that. Working with the Strength Finders lens. So I have lots of paper for you again today. You're going to get a chart that looks like this without the circles. The circles are my modeling for you what it is that you need to do. And that is you're going to circle at least your top 5 on this chart. Now I say that because some of you, well actually all of you, should have received an email from someone from Gallup about 2 weeks ago giving you an access code to get into your full 34 report. Has anybody? Have you done that? Good. So if you've done that, what I'd like to ask you to do is to take this chart and circle your top 10. In Gallup terminology, the top 10 are your dominant counties. Okay? We'll give you a lot of them. You can leave the extras right on the table. Okay, so the purpose of this opening activity is just for you to start to visualize the domains that you live within in a dominant sense. So your strongest, most dominant domain, it should be easy for you to see that just by the way you circle it. There are some people, it's less common, but there are some people in the region that are very well balanced. Most people find themselves heavily weighted in 1 or 2 particular domains. How many people in I'm just curious in this group, how many people are heavily weighted in 1 or 2 domains? Okay. That really is the most common thing that we recognize. So if you turn your chart over, this is a very, very simple thing. All Gallup is asking you to do is to identify what your dominant domain is. Identify which is your least dominant domain. And then the last 2 questions are really trying to dig a little bit deeper, getting your own personal opinion. Do you believe you've been maximizing in living in your dominant domains prior to Strength Finders? If you have, you can jot down a phrase or words that represent how you believe that's happened. And then the more challenging question for people is, have you been blind to any of your less dominant domains? In other words, are you completely clueless as to what you're not good at? Another way to put it. Does it surprise you? Or is it completely accurate in your opinion? The purpose of this activity is nothing more than for you to better understand the domains in which we live our Gallup, our training finders, talent and strengths. It's really important because as we evolve today into partnerships and teaming, you want to easily say, yep, I know Sandy is resource strategic. I know Lori is a relationship builder, and so on. That should be very fluent. Our goal is to become fluent in our understanding of talent and strengths. So that was a simple activity. Now what we're going to do is, before we do this, I want to make sure you're comfortable where you're sitting. I don't really, doesn't matter to me. But what I'm going to have you do next is, based on where you're sitting, you're going to complete a partnership or a team chart. It only represents where you're sitting right now. So if you want to move to another table, doesn't matter to me. This is important because as we get together a little bit later in our session, we're going to be doing a real-life activity, and you're going to need to know where your talents are of your particular group. So if you're good where you are, that's perfectly fine. I don't know when I'm going to copy this. Okay. So we're going to do this. Okay, so I'm going to hand this out. This is brought out in person. Since I forgot to make a copy of this, you are going to highlight or circle only the people at your table. That make sense? So please do bottom for people. You're going to highlight and circle just these three on here. Okay, so we have to, I apologize, we have to kind of adjust midstream here because we got to do this chart. So the purpose of this is we're leading towards an activity in the end that is a real life activity. So if you're mixed with another group, you're mixed with another district, that's fine, but you have to bring your talent together. So each girl have to bring your talent together. Right at the bottom of the chart, whatever, just so you can see what combination of talents that you have. So one of the things that Mary Ann mentioned when she received the chart was, when you look at any particular chart, this happens to be Northville, take the chart and push it away. Get it as far away from your eyes as you can, and just don't read it. Look at the colors. What does it tell you? It should tell you a story without looking at anything other than color.
Relationships.
Right? So now that you've identified the people at your table, at your partnership, at your team,
just one student tells you this. Just one class.
I didn't copy anyone.
Okay. This is the problem with me handing this chart out as early as I had to because I didn't get the copy. Because everybody's so enamored by what the colors are. That's good because you're coming up with conclusions. You're coming up, you're making assumptions and whatnot. And that's awesome. But unfortunately, I got you all off track a little bit. So you probably didn't notice because you're so focused on that chart that I put another sheet of paper on your table. And that is called your partnerships. And what I'd like you to do is turn to the side that says with whom you partner.
A lot of my top 10.
I'm going to ask you to do a little on your own, which is not really talking to anybody. Do some soul searching. What we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish here is to get you to understand why it is that you work well with other people, and why you think, this is the hard one, and why you think other people choose you to work with. So the first half of this is to identify 3 people that you work with. It can also be on a personal level. It could be identifying your partner, or your spouse, or your mother, or your father, or your sister, or your brother. 3 people in a personal relationship or professional. Try to identify the reasons why you work well with that person. So if it's a relationship, why does your relationship work so well? You're doing this through the lens of talents. We're thinking about this through the talents discussion. So the example that Gallup gives us, Mike. When it's time to start a new project, I always talk with Mike. I explain the project to Mike, and he helps me put all the steps in the right order. That's why I choose Mike, and that's why Mike and I work so well together. You can see what we're trying to do here is to slow our fast-paced lives down enough for us to identify what makes our relationship work well with other people. That makes sense? Very important as we get into good teaming, partnerships, and collaborations to truly identify why it is that things are going well with certain people. So choose 3 people and complete just the front side of this chart. Now I'm going to raise the bar a little bit with this group. And what I'd like to ask you to do is to, as you write down describing word why it is that you work well with that person, try to determine what that talent is in that person according to strength finding language. Does that make sense?
Like one of the 34 or one of the top?
It can, well, if you're choosing somebody else, it will be one of, it doesn't have to be the top, it can be any of them. So what I'd like to do is just before we turn the sheet over, just have some general conversation at the table about anything that you've noticed from doing this activity. Again, the purpose of this particular activity is for you to start to think deep about the relationship that you have with other people, personally or professionally, and why it is those relationships work, why it is that people lean on, why it is you lean on other people. It's really important. What Al's trying to get out of this is that it's a conscious effort on our part to surround ourselves with certain people at certain moments in time. If there's a certain goal that you want to accomplish, you should know that person can help get you there. If that makes sense. So just have a conversation for a couple of minutes and then we'll flip it over and we'll think about it from the other direction.
Must be why you don't. Yeah, well,
Okay, looks like you're already having conversations. How challenging was this to find somebody else that you work with in what you believe you bring to that person? Were you able to do it? Great. Would anybody like to share an example? I know it's talking about you and what your talents are. Amy, what do you got?
Megan, when it comes to the technology,
That's a perfect example.
because she's not very good at it, and she knows all stuff that I'm doing for her, and I know she knows all the stuff.
Awesome.
So that's my appreciation.
So that's an example where you have a teacher that knows that technology and understanding technology is a challenge to that person. The teacher knows who to go to get help with that. Any other examples? Plenty of examples out there. Karen. Come on, Karen.
I have that empathetic bone, so teachers will come to me to vent, so I have the ability to listen to them, have them kind of see what they need to do, maybe give them suggestions, if that's what they're asking for, and then kind of move on.
So I don't know if people heard that with the fans running, but Karen is a high school counselor. Counselors tend to have good relationship building skills, empathy in particular. So in working with students, especially at high school, there's a lot of different factors going on that drive their actions on a daily basis. So what Karen had described was people tend to come to her so that they can better understand a more empathetic way of working with a particular student that might be struggling in a class, variety of different reasons. That's a perfect example. So the town is empathy. The domain is relationship building. Anybody else have an example?
Outside of school, I'm involved with the fire department. So the fire chief, when he needs something done, and he wants it done right, the achiever part of me gets picked on a little bit to make sure things get accomplished.
Awesome. So we have achiever. Anybody want to guess what domain that is? What is getting things done? What domain is that? Executing. So the fire department knows they can go to John when things need to get done, to get done right. Absolutely. Perfect example. Anybody else? Amanda.
So my whole team comes to me when they need to know when something's happening and when something's due and when, so I keep them all straight.
So can you pick, now there's a couple, there could be a couple different talents with that. Can you pick the talent you think is most relevant to your example?
Probably a ranger, which is not in my top 5, but I thought it should have been.
Yeah.
It was 6 or 7.
That's achiever.
For
responsibility, is that in your top
Responsibility, that's in my top 10. It's not in my, those two I thought should have been in my top 5, but they're both in my top 10.
Excellent. So listen, I want to say something. I don't know if you heard what Amanda said. A ranger, she picked a ranger, was not in her top 5. I think I mentioned this last time. If I didn't, I apologize. Gallup research shows that your top 10, which are the dominant talents, can be interchangeable in any order within the top 10. So if you think it's not your top 5, at any moment in each particular instance, in a particular situation, you could be flexing that particular talent more so than another one. So please know that. The top 10, when we do their research, can be shuffled around in many different ways. So really, the purpose of this activity is for you to slow down long enough to recognize what you bring to the table in collaboration and what you seek in other people. And that's really important when we're trying to develop highly effective and efficient teams or partnerships or collaboration. It's really important. Very simply put, Gallup believes if you consider and you think about your partnership and your collaboration to this level, you can be more effective. And I have to agree with that. So, we're going to go back to the chart that I gave you. Take a look at that. You already have. or he started highlighting it, when you give you a DNA analysis chart. This chart happens to be the Broad Alton Kirk leadership. So Broad Alton Kirk, we have, for those of you that don't know this, we have 4 buildings, and each building has a leadership team of 5 teachers. So this is broken down, and it's really here just to show you the colors. This is leadership, administrators, the youngest elementary school, the oldest elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. The purpose that I show this to you, the reason that I show this to you, is that when I email this chart to you, this is what you'll want to do with it eventually. The maroon, what you have on your chart now, are everyone's top 5. The blue are 6 through 10. So blue and maroon are the dominant talents. The yellow, which I believe are just as important to know, if not more important, are the less dominant talents. Not weaknesses, but the bottom 5. 30, 31, 32, 33, and 34. So if you take a close look at this particular chart, you will see this is the intermediate score. Just use this as an example, no reason other than when I take a far away look at this, I see there's a lot of yellow in influencing in the intermediate school. That's important to know. I also see in the high school, there's yellow and nothing else but 1 blue, which means influencers at the high school don't exist either. We see a pretty good scattering of maroon across the board, with the exception of influencing in the high school and in the intermediate school. That's why I asked you to push the chart away so you can look at colors. Some people have tried to fill in all 34. So what will this, for each person, what will it look like? It'll just be all numbers and colors. So you don't want to do that. You want to take your lesser 5 and your dominant 10. That will help you see what people bring to the table in any type of collaboration. So you can do this activity one of 2 ways. You can do this activity for the group that's at your table right now, or you can do this activity for the larger district. But what you'll want to do is to start to point out and make impressions and statements about what you see by answering the questions. The first thing is, very simply put, what's the first thing you notice? Across the region, I think I mentioned this, but maybe more so. Across the region, it's not easy to see on this because I have so many different things on it. It's easy to see on this single chart. Which domain across the region would you believe is the lesser domain? Not talent, but domain. Which do you believe is the lesser domain across the region? It's very clearly obvious that it's influencing. When we tried to come up with some conclusions why that would be, we really didn't have, quite frankly, many conclusions why that would be. So influencing across the HFM region, we don't have any influence. It's obviously the lesser domain. Can you guess what the strongest domain is? Sorry? Yes, it's relationship building. But I will also say this. When I looked at all of these charts that I made, the one thing that became obvious to me is that where do you believe that there was more relationship building? What level? Elementary. And there was much more executing and strategic in the secondary level. Relationship notes are most dominant across the region in the elementary school. So just quickly go through this chart, or this worksheet, and answer as many questions as you can from whichever perspective you want, from the table or from the district-wide. Anybody like to share any insights on questions in particular? Yeah, dig deep. What challenges might the team that you're looking at face? What areas will you should see great success? Anybody want to talk to me about what you noticed?
As a team, we covered.
Marlena?
Well, I just wanted to say that something that worries me the most is that I see that connectiveness and that adaptability is not like a strong area in the domain that's the highest for our CLC, which happen to be two of my top. So like to me
So
that
is that where
bothers
you,
me.
because we're going to turn to you and
Well, no,
Diane,
but you know what I
think
mean?
that
So I
happens?
don't know if that's true for everybody, that like what worries you is might be something that's a strength for you that you're not seeing in others. You know what I
Do
mean?
you see that strength in yourself?
I feel your connectedness and I feel very flexible with that.
So do you have confidence
So,
in it?
I do.
So that should worry you.
What worries me that I don't see it in the rest of like our team so much.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
That's your role, maybe somebody else.
So that means there's work to be done. That means that we might have to come to you to help us get that work done.
Now we're in trouble.
Anybody else?
We put ours.
Hang on. Go ahead.
That as a table as a whole, anyone that's an activator or self-assurance, ranking the top five out of all these activators.
Out of all these people here.
Right.
Yeah. That is a concern. So an activator. Anybody remember in layman's term what an activator is?
It's for positive action.
Activator gets things going. They try to think of it, the gal term. They jump right into it and they jumpstart. That's what it is. Jumpstart.
Says they're on the couch.
They are.
I like that.
They are. And I think if you extended this further out to the top 10, you'll see that there are several of us in here that would be that. So it may not be in the top 5, but it's definitely in the top 10. So I think if you extended this beyond the top 5 of the chart, you can see somebody fill that routinely.
But the one thing that I think that we all as educators need to know, and this is where education gets a bad rap tonight, is that we tend to over-meeting things to death. Meeting, overanalyzing things. Now, we need to do that, but yet we never get going. It takes, in education, change takes forever, doesn't it? It takes forever. So what I say is responsible change. The pace of it needs to be right. But we've been working with Dr. Les Loomis. He's former superintendent in Bethlehem, and now he's a consultant. One of the things that he's been trying to get us to do is ready, fire, aim. And what he's saying is, in his time as superintendent, number of years as superintendent and whatnot, is that just what I just said, educators tend to talk, and not get things going. So get out there, and his proposition is simply this: it's okay to make safe mistakes. So ready, fire, get out there and do it. Try it, see what happens. If it's not life-threatening and whatnot, which most of what we do in education isn't, let's learn from it so that we can make better decisions later on. But let's get out there and do it. That's what I see the activator role can be. It's a good occupation. Anybody else? Anything off of this chart that you'd like to share with us? That's good.
I think from looking at our chart, there was nobody in our school that's in the influencing category. And so it makes you stop and think, okay, what are we missing in our program because we're lacking those qualities in our leaders? Are there aspects in our program that are falling short because we're missing some of those traits?
Well, John, I'm glad you brought that up. So listen, John, I had a conversation with John Taylor just a few minutes ago, and it was very similar to the conversation I had with Wheelerville. So if you take Lake Pleasant, if you take Wheelerville, then you take a school possibly Northville in different situations, why would influencing, is it more likely that influencing will be a less dominant talent in those types of districts? And if so, why? We've come to the conclusion that it is yes. So consider this. If you are a singleton, if you are in a district where you are the only kindergarten teacher, or the only first grade teacher, or the only math teacher, you're somewhat in isolation. You're not really collaborating with other teachers. Broadalbin Perth, for example, is not a huge district, but we have mostly 6 sections in each elementary grade. So you have a grade level team meeting once a month. There's collaboration. In your conversation, would you agree that in some cases you're trying to influence others, that your opinion is the right way to do something? Of course it is. That's what tends to happen in collaborative environments. But in districts that are smaller, you tend not to have those opportunities. So that may be a reason why influencing shows up as less dominant in certain districts. It's also, again, less dominant in our region. Our region doesn't have large school systems. We tend to have smaller school systems. Wells faces the same thing. The other thing that I noticed, and I tend not to talk publicly about this, but one of the things that I also believe is, in my opinion, is that the style of leadership in a building can either support or hinder the influencing of people. In other words, if there's a real strong top-down leader in your building that says this is the way it's going to be, and this is how decisions are going to be made, this is how you want to implement something, don't you think over time that would stifle people's opinions and voices? Eventually you shut down and you say, I'm not going to be heard, so I'm not going to put it out there. In my opinion, leadership does have some influence over the strength of influencing in any particular system, school system, or that's more my opinion than anything else. Anything else on this particular chart? Yes?
I'm feeling good that relationship building is so strong in our district, because that's life skills right there. And so you're teaching them, but you're also teaching them life skills. So I'm really happy about that.
I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, on the flip side of it, I know for myself, I wish that I were stronger in the 2 outside ones. Doesn't make me happy that I can thrive in relationship building and influencing, which are my obviously dominant ones. But take me, for example, in my role as leading a school system. If you look at the Broadalbin Perth chart, I have to rely on, well, these are my leadership team members. I have to rely on the people that can get things done in executing and strategize and strategic thinking. I know my directors, the director of special program, special education, and all of the special programs, and my director of curriculum assessment and instruction and grants. They tend to be stronger in those outside domains. And those are the people that I work closely with. So that's helpful to me. But getting back to what you said, absolutely. I happen to think my favorite domain is,
Especially in the younger grades.
what's that?
In the younger grades, like you said, TLC has a lot of relationship building. I think that's great.
I agree. So I have a handful of slides just to run through, and one more quick talking activity, and then I'm going to give you a real-life activity where you're going to determine a goal that you want to accomplish and how it is that you're going to accomplish it using the demonstrating activity. Okay, so let's go through these slides first. What does a great partnership look like? This is according to Gallup, according to their research. This is an activity that's going to lead you to that conclusion. I'm not going to just give you the answer. I'm going to ask you to Brainstorm what you think Gallup says are the characteristics of a great partnership. Think about one-to-one partnership, think about teaming, think about collaboration. But think about it from your eyes, not the people sitting at the table, but from your point of view. Think about some of the best collaborations that you've had during your lifetime, personal or professional. And what are the characteristics of that? Was it that you and that other person had the same beliefs? So we have the same beliefs or core values. That's an example of why you believe that works so well. Maybe it is you recognize, even without working through strength finders, that you balance each other. That person was good at something, I was good at something else, and that's how we came together. What you're going to do is you're going to take this chart that I give you, think about from your own life experiences, characteristics that you believe lead to what Gallup would say is the best partnership, characteristics of the best partnership. That makes sense? We all have experiences. I think we can, my guess is you'll get at least 50% of what Gallup says are the characteristics. So the questions in blue really are just to help jog your mind. Why did you select that particular partnership or experience? What made you feel that this was the best? Who or what was responsible for making it a good team experience? How did it affect your team performance? And how were your strengths used or not used? On this sheet of paper, again, you're writing characteristics of what you believe a good partnership would look like. I'm going to give you the #1 Gallup response, and that is having a common mission, vision, or goal. A common mission, vision, or goal is one of the characteristics of why good partnerships exist. Sorry. No, you think about any life experience you've had. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to run through the list. Raise your hand if you had something similar to what Gallup says what makes up a great team. So just raise your hand if you can see how close you were to Gallup's research. I already gave you one, and that is a great team. Everyone shares a common mission and purpose. Raise your hand if you had that. Did anyone have, everyone on the team understands and appreciates that he or she is great at some things and not very good at others? Good. Team members have common language. This one a lot of people miss. Common language to describe each other's talents, strengths, weaknesses, and performing goals and expectations. The key to this is the common language. While oftentimes we find out the lack of success in accomplishing a particular goal, I still struggle with this on a fairly regular basis here in our school system, is people don't necessarily truly understand what it is we're trying to accomplish because we're not using the common language that's so important. Team members are aware of each other's talent filters or each other's talents. How many people had that? First have to start out with being aware of what people bring to the table. Team members are emotionally and psychologically engaged in their work. Anybody have that? I'm sorry? Positivity, yep. Team members intentionally structure activities to maximize the team's talents. Hopefully you heard some of the things we discussed earlier. What today is about is the intentionality of using your talents. And that's what most successful teams do. Team members develop support systems and appropriate workarounds for gaps in strengths and performances. So what we mean by a workaround is, in one of the first activities, recognizing if you've been blind to your lesser talents. A workaround is understanding what lesser talents exist on a team and working around them. You don't have to be good at everything to be successful. You just have to know what you're not good at, if that makes sense. So that's a workaround. Team members are highly collaborative and have a number of complementary partnerships. So depending on the size of your team, if there's a team of 10, but you can differentiate the roles of the people within your team. There might be 2 people whose number one talent or their greatest talent domain is influencing. Those people will be responsible for and be identified, intentionally identified as, we're going to get something done, but you are going to help sell it. There might be 2 or 3 people that they're the executors. They're the ones that you lean on as a team to get things done, to activate it and to get it done. That makes sense? Then they're the relationship builders. Okay? And then lastly, and I love this one, team members are magnets for talent. They seek out talented people, and talented people seek them out. Imagine if you had a choice, and maybe you do, but imagine if you had a choice in your district who you could work with.
Sean Rose, please come to the main office.
Oftentimes you don't. Oftentimes your building leadership puts you in a particular grade, particular subject based on your certification, and you're there to work with certain people. But if school districts and buildings were able to align people up based on their talents and whatnot, wouldn't that be an amazing study? Imagine that, if we could put people in certain areas and grades and subjects and whatnot based on talents and lesser talents, do we think we'd accomplish more? Gallup says yes. Would that be an interesting study? Characteristics of 3, going to Gallup, 3 basic types of teams. The first one is top-down, and that is, it's a made-up collection of individuals, as all of these are, with different roles. But in a dependent team, the building leader, the manager, the principal, they are obviously in charge. They lead, they set the agenda, they set the priorities, they set the rules, they dictate everything. That's a dependent team. An independent team, again, made up of a collection of individuals who have their own roles. The building leader, principal, manager has less control. Team members work on their own tasks with general direction from the leader. They require concerted efforts to improve and develop. They concentrate on minimizing or fixing their weaknesses while maintaining each person's level of strength. Now this is all Gallup language, and I'll come back and tell you why I remind you of that in a minute. Because of their independent nature, there are limited opportunities for team members to join forces, each using his or her own talents to complement each other's strengths. I have a Board of Education member that works for the Bank of America. This Board of Education member has never met his direct supervisor. He actually thought the direct supervisor was a different nationality than she actually is. They are spread out all over the country. They get together on the phone. They don't work and maximize their strengths and their talents because they don't know each other. They don't know each other's strengths and lesser talents, so they can't complement one another. This language and all of these are directly out of Gallup publications, and they are for corporations, not for education. Any reference to education that you might see in here is from myself doing that, changing it myself. What we believe is the best type of team to work in is an interdependent team where members rely on each other to get work done. The modus operandi is to position team members so that each can do what he or she does best. Focus on each other's personal strengths, manage around their weaknesses. Share a common mission and purpose, are aware of our unique talents and how they can help the team respond to or achieve performance or goals, and they know how team members can best contribute. If there's anything you get out of today in our discussion of teaming, it's this, what we can do different. And I can only think of, from Broad Almond Perk, all of the different collaboration opportunities that you have in grade level meetings, department level meetings, all kinds of collaboration activities that we have. I wonder if you come into it with this perspective of who can bring what to the table to help us get things accomplished. Let's lean on one another for this. Let's lean on one another for that. That in Broad Almond Perk is going to be a challenge that we have moving forward. But it can only happen if it's intentional. You have to pause and recognize what people bring to the table. That's really what we're trying to accomplish here in today's concept. And quote from Gal, the team members learn how they can more intentionally use their talents and strengths to help them achieve their performance objectives. They gain a process they can use time and time again to set them up for success. So what I believe is important is doing it intentionally, and over here, process. If you are constantly operating through the lens of, I know that person does this well, I know I do this well, it becomes natural. So we talk about a talent. There, session one, a talent is a naturally recurring activities that we do well. The talent of a team is the natural process that we do over and over and over that leads to success. This is just another example of that, all says the same thing. Action plan. So the last thing we're going to do in our program is to ask all of you, challenge all of you to think of a real world problem, challenge that you might face within the group that you're in right now. What you'll need to do is to go back to the very beginning of our session where you either wrote down for the people sitting at your table or you highlighted for the people sitting at your table what your top 10 or top 5 talents are. You will need to know that as you complete this activity. You can probably guess what I'm going to ask you to do is to solve this problem using the people that you have at your table. That make sense? What I'd like to ask you to do is just give me 3 or 4 minutes to make sure you fully understand this activity by letting me show you the example that I put together for you. So the example is this. You're going to identify a real world problem or challenge that you need solved. My example is in District X, the teacher leadership team would like to institute a character education program in their elementary school. That's what they're trying to solve. That's what they want to do. Their goal is for every elementary student will receive character education instruction 20 minutes per week using a teacher-developed character education scope or sequence of instruction. That's a clearly stated goal. How do we know whether we've reached that goal? Answer the question. Have they received 20 minutes of instruction completing character education? In your opinion, what does success look like for this challenge? In my opinion, success looks like this. All elementary students will be able to clearly identify and give examples of the 6 pillars of character. Each student will be able to present their understanding of such by using examples of good character behavior. clearly identified what it will look like. What are the strengths of my team? So Mark is on my team. Mark is a strong influencer. He's a strong communicator and will be able to convince the building faculty that this program is important enough to dedicate 20 minutes per week of instruction by providing examples of cross-curricular activities. He will utilize his room and related talents to embrace everyone's point of view and to make them feel like their opinions matter. He's an influencer. On my team, I know Mark is the person that's going to sell this. And he's going to sell it to elementary teachers that don't want to give up 1 minute of their day because of Common Core and because of the mandates. The challenge is, we're asking for 20 minutes of parent education instruction. Mark, being an influencer, understands that there are different ways that you can provide the teachers what they want and still get the 20 minutes of parent education instruction. He's a strong relator, he's a strong communicator, and he has very strong mood. Winning others over. That's what Mark brings to the table for my team. Lisa, she's very strategic. Lisa knows that she will help the leadership team fully understand the most appropriate course of action to take to gain consent to move forward with this initiative. The key here is to fully understand. Lisa takes context. She understands the context of the organization that she's in, and the building that she's in. She understands that there are certain people that aren't going to budge. She understands who they are. She also understands the context of the mandates and what it is that it's going to take to build a strategy for this. She will seek the input of all team members as well as building colleagues and administration. She will use this information to better understand the issues that might exist in implementing this program. Strategic thinking is Lisa's strength. That's something that we are going to lean on to reach our goal. Okay? And then the last member of my team is Jimmy. Jimmy gets things done easily. I've got 4 people on my team, 3 people on my team, just these 3 people. Jimmy's the one that gets things done. He's very focused on getting things accomplished. He's not very good at relationship building. But he's the one person on the team that can visualize a plan and put the plan in action. He will be responsible for keeping the team on task and helping everyone fully understand their role on the team. So what we have here, in this example, a team that's set a common goal or a purpose, a team that's identified what they bring to the table and what role they will play. What are the lesser strengths of this particular team? This particular team's weakest domain is relationship building. They've identified that. They recognize that. That's the workaround. So the workaround around relationship building is staying on task and having a very clear plan. You don't always have to be able to be friendly with people and build relationships and get things accomplished when you work with other people. But you have to be very concise and you have to be very detailed in making sure that you're reaching your goal. As a result, this team will need to rely heavily on Mark for being the voice of the team. However, by presenting a very clear vision of the program, what they want to implement, and how it will have a positive impact on the building as a whole and the culture, they will be able to overcome the issue of not being strong relationship builders. What specific strengths does the team bring? The team is very strong in fully understanding the current conditions of the building and why it is necessary to implement the program. So they are strong strategic, which is fully understanding what's ahead, and building a strategy and executing. And they're very good, I should say here, and they know how to get things done. What does success look like? I pose a few different questions. Is the character education program implemented according to the parameters set forth by the building administration and the leadership team? Are the students meeting the specific learning objectives that are set? And is there whole building support for the program? Not just pockets, but whole building support. Those are the questions that I would ask whether we see success or not. The that help you understand what we're looking for? It requires you to think closely about the people on your team. Okay, in about 15 to 20 minutes to come up with something awesome. I think we are all at the point where we start to share out some of the ideas that we have. I'd like to ask, there's been a lot of positive conversations. I'd like to ask the team to kind of talk us through it. I'm just going to turn to the Northville team. I'm actually most excited about the problem that they are bringing to the table and what their plan is to solve it. So, go for it.
Okay. We had talked to Stephen about this before we started today of how we're going to implement this at Northville, because all of us are getting the information, getting the codes. Everyone's going to be doing this in the fall. We're wondering how we're going to get staff buy-in, how it's going to trickle down to the kids. So we talked about it previously, so we decided to use that as our problem. Today, the rest of the Northville teachers will be coming down in June, so we're hoping they'll use the same problem, and when we get together after that meeting, we can kind of come up with the ideas from both sides so we can kind of start our plan and move forward. So how to implement this within the school district is our challenge, and our goal is building support and participation within our staff to use with the students in the future. Finding success is that all staff members will be reflecting on their strengths, and we will have more collaboration and a positive school environment, because we feel that the staff will now be using their strengths and feeling like they're being, I don't know, kind of being valued. I guess is kind of how we're looking at the positive work environment. Each of us, as just the three of us right here, all of us have our strengths in three of the areas. So John is more strategic, Chris is more relationship, and I'm more executing. So each of us brings something to the table where John can keep the team focused, having our long-term goals. Chris can keep us working as a group and feeling involved, and I can implement the plan. Our lesser strengths, as it seems to be across the board, is the influencing piece. So how are we, again, going to convince others to kind of jump on board? The specific strengths we believe is, and try to accomplish this particular goal, is that we were well-rounded in the balance of strengths, because each of us had represented in 3 of the 4 areas. And then how we're going to assess it is constant feedback from the staff. So,
fantastic. So I think that's an awesome real-world problem that we want to solve in the district. The challenge that the team has is that you are taking this program, we all enjoy it, but you've got to find a way to work around for you is influence. How are you going to influence the team or your district or your building that this is really valuable to bring in? So that's the thing you've done to get you closer to achieving that is you've identified what the workaround is and it's the influence of each. And I think you've even identified 1 or 2 people that can help you with that on the team in Northville. That's excellent. That's excellent. In your opinion, are you confident that if you rely on what people bring to the table, that you can see success?
as long as the people that possess those strengths own those strengths and will do that, will value them and work towards that. You don't want to have somebody who's not top in influencing, presenting materials to the staff members.
That's right. That's right. Fantastic. Thank you very much for excited about that goal. Does anybody else want to share another real life scenario? I'm not going to share them all, but
We'll share our.
because you're the communicator over there, right?
That's right, that's why I got the room right at me. Yeah. I'll embrace it.
Okay, so do me a favor, face that way so that
We worked as a whole table, and our goal was to increase our participation in the 1,000 Book Club program at the TLC. We weren't able to come up with exact statistics, but we would be able to, if we were really doing it, we would hopefully have a real statistics. So we want to reintroduce it to 100 and hopefully 150 families using the program. In our opinion, what does it look like? What does success look like? We would have more participants, more children reading, increased reading levels in our classrooms, and 50% students per grade level, and 50% students per grade level using the books. What are the strengths of your team? So myself, Amanda, and Lori are all influencers. We're in that category somewhere. So we are hoping to win parents and students over with the program that was redesigned or redeveloped by Beth, Stephanie, and Sandy, who are organizing it, decorating it, and volunteers, and revamping the program. And then, like I said, the other three of us would hopefully be able to use that to influence people and sell it, essentially, so, the positives of it. And then we talked about, I'm sorry, it's not on here, Melissa being able to make sure that there was, she's empathetic and includer, so she was making sure that each bag and each way we put it together included all the different kids, maybe having different levels in each book, or categorizing the bags so that they're appropriate by level. Our lesser strengths, we were worried about that if, she was saying that if not everybody stuck to their strategy or their strengths, it might have an initial tie, but then would allow if we couldn't keep it all together. Our conversation was a lot more rich than my regurgitation. Specific strengths that you believe bring to the team to accomplish this goal. The team is strong in executing. We understand where students have to be, and if we all share the same plan and the same goal, and hopefully we can reach that goal. And again, what will it look like? It will look like increased participation and increased reading levels across the board.
So a question, is there anybody within the team that has focus as one of their top five?
No, but nobody in our, nobody there.
No way. So focus is a problem in Broad Alderman Park. Well, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's a problem, and I can't recall, I don't think it's really very prevalent on my leadership team as well. And some of you might, in Broad Alderman Park, you might agree with me when I say this. We tend to get things started, but we tend to lose focus on it, and we tend not to complete it. And that's a really important thing for us to understand and create workarounds to make sure that we get things, we get something started, and then we finish it, and we recognize along the way what the benchmarks are so that we can stay the course. So that's why I asked that question.
Well, one of the things we had talked about was having Amanda, she's in the strategic thinking, she has a couple or one in the strategic thinking domain, so we talked about her talent being able to analyze the data that's coming in and making sure participants are continuing to use it, and that we're staying the course in what we started with. So it would be beneficial for us to have more than one person on the team who can analyze the data and make sure that,
Absolutely.
and that, like, we're looking at the things and not saying, the Sullivan family, yeah, we're up to 150 books, but 75 of those bags were signed out by this one family or something that somebody analyzing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So those are good questions, and I think a great example of how we can utilize the strengths of the team. I'm going to disappoint you, but we're not going to share out any more examples because we are going to have enough time. I want to close by sincerely thanking all of you for taking the leap and getting into something that you didn't necessarily know what we were going to do. We're closing this program and giving you, hopefully, a lot to bring back to whatever it is that you choose, in your personal life, in your professional life, in the people that you work with, and the relationships that you build. We knew coming out of the gate that we didn't have nearly enough time to get an awful lot of conflict here. I hope that we met the goal of the program, and that was to simply introduce strength finders to you, and to hopefully teach you enough that you'll want to stay involved in this. I think, I know I'm encouraged that we have 7 members of our region go down to Washington DC, receive the same training I did. Excellent, a little bit jealous because they have different trainers, and their trainers gave them a little bit more of a perspective from the education side of it than I have. I was all for it. So I'm a little bit disappointed now. But I do think in the region, we've gotten some momentum going with strength finders. Hopefully the resources that I've shared with you, you'll consider bringing them and implementing them in your district, in your classroom, getting the book that's most relevant of using strengths to maximize your potential as a teacher and as a leader in your school district. You all have it, and you're going to have it when you get my next email, but my email address is tomlinson@bpcsd.org. If you have any comments, personal comments that you want, or questions that you want to ask me, always feel free to reach out to me. I beg and plead you to take that 3 minutes to complete that Survey Monkey evaluation. It will help me fine tune all of this. This is my first shot.
Thank you.
Thank you.